A new poll has James Talarico up 5 points over Ken Paxton in the race for U.S. Senate. How money and scandal could factor in today on the Texas Standard.
Texas Standard is a production of KUT Austin, KERA North Texas, Houston Public Media, and Texas Public Radio in San Antonio.
I'm Laura Rice. Texas shifted a lot of foster care responsibilities to third-party contractors about a decade ago, but now many have closed their doors. What we can learn from a key example. There's a civil war of sorts going on at a Houston megachurch. What a recent ruling means for a congregation's right to control church business. No matter where you are, data centers are one of the hottest topics in Texas right now. But what exactly are they? We'll dig in, and we'll take you to a Texas sanctuary for wolves and wolf dogs today on the Texas Standard. From Waco to Washington, Dallas to D.C., it's the Texas Standard for Wednesday, July 29th. I'm Laura Rice. State Representative James Talarico is up 5 points over Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton in a new poll about the U.S. Senate race. It's the biggest lead Talarico has had thus far, and he does especially well among independents, which might be expected, but also with non-college educated voters who have consistently favored Republicans in recent years. Of course, Democrats have had their hopes up in statewide races before. In 2024, Ted Cruz beat Colin Allred by 9 points. In 2020, John Cornyn beat M.J. Hagar by close to 10 points. The closest Democrats got in the Senate races in recent years was in 2018, when Cruz still beat Beto O'Rourke by just over 2 points. But there's not a Republican incumbent in the race this time around, and A.G. Paxton is facing allegations he committed the kind of voter fraud he's crusaded against during his time as Texas AG. Could those factors be at play? And what about cash on hand as we're now in the waning months leading up to November? Gabby Birnbaum is the Texas Tribune's Washington correspondent. Gabby, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me.
Tell us about this new poll. Who conducted it, and what do the new numbers tell us about this Senate race?
Yeah, so this is a new poll from Texas Public Opinion Research. That's a group, they're a nonpartisan polling outlet, but I will note that the director of the group is Luke Warford, who previously ran for office as a Democrat, is a Democratic strategist, so, sort of make of that what you will. But this new poll shows Talarico at 45%, James Talarico, the Democrat, and the Republican Ken Paxton at 40%. So this is a 5% lead here for Talarico, bigger than when they last polled the race shortly after the runoff in late May, when Talarico was leading by 3 points. And so I think it shows a few things there. Number one, still a ton of undecideds, right? And number two, potentially a concerning lack of consolidation for Ken Paxton at that 40% number, but also, potentially room to grow among those undecideds.
Well, let's dig into that a little. I mean, this poll didn't get into the whys, but anecdotally, what are you hearing from voters and experts as they compare these two candidates?
Yeah, I mean, I think for Democrats, this is a cycle where Democrats are really enthused to vote. They're very frustrated about President Trump. And even for those who, might be more on the fence, I think a lot of people, who are in Talarico's camp appreciate the way he talks about high prices, the way he talks about the issues. He's a Christian, sort of a different flavor of candidate than we've seen, who's very sort of, open and vocal about his faith. And talks about sort of the brokenness of the political system of politics in a way that I think certainly resonates with his supporters. If you support General Paxton, I think people appreciate what he's done as Attorney General, that he's strong on the border, that he has endorsements from law enforcement, things of that nature. And then he's certainly made the case on the trail and in his media, right, that Talarico is too radical for Texas, and pointed out, some comments he's made on various culture war issues, and tried to present it as Talarico just being sort of too far outside the norm for what Texans are used to in their politics. So those are, I think, sort of what we hear on the trail.
Well, despite this new poll, a lot of prognosticators still give Paxton the edge in this race. Is that primarily because a Democrat winning a statewide seat in Texas is just such an uphill battle?
Yeah, I mean, I think, until a Democrat does win a statewide race, the Republicans are always going to have that built-in advantage, right? Because it just hasn't been done in over 30 years. And certainly, all the factors that have given Republicans victories still exist, right? I mean, there are, more Republican voters in every election than there have been Democratic voters. That Republican base, when they're excited, comes out. Rural voters, typically non-college educated voters, these are groups that Republicans have done really well with, en route to victory.
What about money? I mean, the primary race where Paxton defeated Senator John Cornyn, am I right that was the most expensive in U.S. history? I mean, is that kind of spending playing out in the general election?
Yeah, I mean, all in, that was the most expensive primary we saw, right, between the primary and the runoff. Right now, we've seen Talarico spending, beginning his general election ads this summer. He's running a few ads, on TV, elsewhere. We have not seen spending yet from the Paxton camp. I would assume they're waiting until the fall. If you're Talarico, obviously he has lower name ID than Paxton, who's been in politics for years. So if you're him, you want to spend and define yourself right before Paxton can negatively define you with his message. And then the other factor is Talarico has way more money. Talarico in 2 successive quarters raised $27 million in the first quarter and about $30 million in the second quarter. Paxton raised about $9 million in the second quarter, right? So Talarico just has a huge financial advantage at the moment, and he's certainly using it to begin spending over the summer.
Well, let's talk about Ken Paxton. He's no stranger to controversy. Remind us about what he's been accused of when it comes to the voting allegations.
So this was a story from my colleague, Zach Despart at the Texas Tribune and ProPublica. And so he found that, in the divorce filing that State Senator Angela Paxton had filed, it said that A.G. Paxton moved out of their home in Collin County. My colleagues, sort of went to great lengths to establish that A.G. Paxton is likely living in a house in Denton County. But we saw that A.G. Paxton is registered to vote and has voted in Collin County in the past several elections. And so, my colleague Zach sort of in that story raised questions about A.G. Paxton's voting patterns there as someone who, has been very, very active in trying to prosecute voter fraud and made that a real sort of centerpiece of his political identity.
Has the Talarico campaign seized on that, or is he sort of letting the news media talk about it and leave it there?
No, Talarico certainly talked about it, put that out, that his campaign and the Texas Democrats have certainly, I think, made hay of that and noted that in their materials.
And Gabby, what have we heard from the Attorney General about these accusations?
Yeah, his campaign didn't address the specific questions. They did say in a statement that this is a baseless, lie-filled tabloid story. So that's sort of been their posture as it relates to this.
Gabby Birnbaum covers Washington for the Texas Tribune. We'll link to her latest at texasstandard.org. Gabby, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, summertime usually means peach season, but it's been a tough year for Texas peach farmers. An uncharacteristically warm winter paired with a late freeze wiped out much of the crop. Houston Public Media's Natalie Weber looks at how farmers and produce sellers have been adjusting.
You have a great weekend. Thanks for coming by.
On a hot, bright Friday afternoon, Bridget Stuns is buying produce at the Peach Creek Country Market, about an hour southwest of Houston.
I was here last week and I'm here again. Whenever they got peaches or, they're getting the cantaloupes in and the watermelon, I'll come.
Many of those peaches, however, may not be from Texas this year. That includes the farmers market where Stuns is doing her grocery shopping, located just off I-69. Jeff Pavlock is the store's owner.
So what we've been doing this year is we've been carrying a lot of South Carolina peaches. The Texas peach crop was wiped out, I think about 90%, 95% from when I talked to my buddy.
Pavlock says it's always a bit of a challenge to grow peaches in Texas. The fruit trees need chill hours, a certain number of hours where winter temperatures stay below 45 degrees Fahrenheit. This year, he says, peach trees didn't get enough chill hours, and a late spring freeze also wiped out much of the harvest. That freeze was followed by heavy rains.
It's like 1 week you'll get a peach in that'll knock your lights out, and the next week you got to deal with the brown rot, and that's from all the rain.
And Texas weather can be unpredictable.
The weather in Texas is consistently inconsistent. There is no such thing as a, quote, normal year.
That's Tim Hartman, an assistant professor with Texas A&M who works with fruit crops. It's hard to say exactly how many peaches Texas produces each year. The Texas Department of Agriculture doesn't track that number. And Texas isn't one of the 7 states that participate in the U.S. Department of Agriculture's peach count. However, Hartman predicts that this year's peach crop will be less than half of last year's harvest. He says a lack of sufficient chill hours is becoming an increasingly common problem for Texas farmers. That's because they need chill hours to produce healthy and sweet fruit. Hartman compares a lack of chill hours to a lack of sleep.
You're going to be more likely to snooze through your alarm clock, right? And then you're not going to be very productive that day. That's the same thing these plants are doing.
So what you see up ahead, that's the peach orchard.
Jim Pokluda owns a boutique farm north of Houston, where he grows a variety of fruits and vegetables. His peach trees are relatively young, so he says they're not in their most productive years yet. Still, Pokluda was expecting to harvest about 5,000 pounds of peaches this year.
This year, I literally got 0. Every single fruit on those 310 trees aborted or was frozen.
He says the plants may have struggled to produce fruit in part because they're young. But he also attributes the poor harvest to this year's inconsistent weather.
You can accumulate chill hours, but if it gets really, really warm, then you can negate those chill hours. And so take them away, and then you can gain them again, but now you've confused the plant. And then if all of a sudden you throw in a freeze, then you'll just kill everything.
Back at the Peach Creek Country Market, a fan roars near the produce to keep shoppers cool. A worker uses a forklift to load pallets into a trailer that will deliver the fruit stand's produce across the region. Jeff Pavlock, the owner, says the South Carolina peaches he's bought this year have been good, but
I ain't gonna sit back and tell you I miss my juicy old Texas peach.
For now, he says, farmers markets are doing the best they can.
And we will say our prayers for a better season next year, because I know the good Lord will take care of us.
I'm Natalie Weber in Houston.
So how do you use artificial intelligence? Are you all in or suspicious or somewhere in between? I'm asking because Texas Standard really wants to know. It's the topic of our Talk of Texas segment this week, and it's research for a larger project we're working on. We'd like to hear from you. Leave us a message at texasstandard.org/talk. Up next, a story about the data centers powering our increasing use of AI and how they work exactly. Stay with us.
Support for Texas Standard comes from UT San Antonio, providing education and research for communities across Texas, with a focus on student success and workforce development. The University of Ambition, ambition.utsa.edu. Support for Texas Standard comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
This is the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. Data centers are popping up everywhere in Texas. Hundreds are already operating in the state, and hundreds more are in some stage of planning or construction. Some estimates show Texas may be on track to outpace Virginia as the data center capital of the U.S. That is, if most of the data centers being planned actually get built. But what actually is a data center? KUT's Lee Walden, Kaylee Hunt, and Katie McAfee teamed up to find answers.
The machine humming in the computer visualization lab at UT Austin is soft, almost a friendly purring.
Today, the 20 or so TV-sized monitors are lit with graphs and human body scans glowing with saturated colors.
We're meeting a man who has spent his career working to, well, cure cancer.
Hi, my name's Tom. Thank you for taking time to meet with me. It's a delight to be first-time caller, long-time listener.
Tom Yankelov is not what you might picture when you imagine a cancer researcher.
There's no white coat and latex gloves.
He's just wearing a t-shirt with a flannel over it.
Yankelov isn't a medical doctor. He doesn't work directly with cancer patients.
He kind of just does a lot of math.
This is the rate of change of the number of tumor cells at position X and time t, and that is equal to how the cells are moving around. That's given by a diffusion term.
Yankelov's lab uses physics models that are built on a ton of data.
Data from patients,
data from existing cancer treatments,
data from how tumors move around and grow and respond to drugs.
Lots and lots of data.
A computer crunches all of that data and comes up with predictions for how a tumor in a cancer patient will grow, and more importantly, how a tumor will respond to different types of treatment.
But it didn't happen overnight.
It took us 10 years basically to get from the idea on a whiteboard to a system of equations that we could populate with data we could measure and then show that it had very good predictive accuracy.
A decade ago, Yankelov's team didn't have the equations. They didn't even have the technology.
You have to have computers that are fast enough that can actually do these computations to solve these partial differential equations, these systems of partial differential equations on a grid size that's the size of, say, the human brain, for example.
Their research needs powerful computers to make these predictions.
Stacks and stacks and stacks of really powerful computers.
And there's one place on campus that has those kinds of machines.
It's called the Texas Advanced Computing Center, or TAC, and it's UT Austin's data center.
You can see here, what a data center looks like. It's just racks of computers with a lot of cooling.
That's Niall Gaffney. He took us on a tour of TAC with his colleague Tommy Minyard last March.
We wanted to see what exactly goes on inside a data center.
Peering through a glass pane, it looks just as Gaffney described it. A big room filled with rows and rows of computers. It's like a forest of black pillars.
It looks like something out of a sci-fi movie.
Gaffney had a warning for us before we actually stepped inside. And it's a good warning for our listeners, too.
Be careful with the headphones, because when it gets loud, people aren't supposed to wear hearing aids in there, for example.
We opened the door to go inside. He wasn't kidding.
It's extremely, almost painfully loud inside.
The loudest parts of the room reach up to 100 decibels. That's like having your ear next to a running chainsaw.
It's coming from hundreds of cooling fans that make sure the stacks of computers don't overheat.
Cooling is a big problem for data centers. We'll get more into that in the second story in our series.
At first, the air inside the room was uncomfortably cold.
A few steps later, it gets hot.
Then cold.
Then hot again.
Gaffney's colleague Tommy Minyard says it's like this on purpose. This setup helps them save energy.
Basically what you do is you put the racks back to back so all the hot air is in one location, and then the cooling units can pull all the hot air out and blow cold air to the front. So this actually keeps the hot air and the cold air separate, so it improves the overall efficiency of the cooling.
We keep walking through the room. Fluorescent lights illuminate the rows of hot and cold.
Wires weave in and out of server racks that blink with blue and red and white and green bulbs like Christmas lights.
As we leave the room, the humming feels like it's following us.
Most of the servers at TAC are busy crunching data that scientists use to study things like climate change, medicine, and even outer space.
TAC processed some of the images of the earliest galaxies from the James Webb Telescope.
Other data centers are used for storage, everything from bank transactions to medical records to memes shared on social media.
But more and more are being built for AI.
And those data centers need more of everything. More space, more power, and more water.
But why?
The data centers of the past have mostly been doing things like Google searches. When you search something on Google, a little robot goes into an index of everything it's seen on the internet.
Like a card catalog in a library.
It finds the page on the internet that answers your question.
But when you ask an AI chatbot a question, the robot pulls from its own memory, all the information it's been trained on, and gives you what it thinks is the most likely answer.
It's like if you ask an AI, what's 1 + 1? That's pretty easy.
But there's harder questions out there. Like if you ask an AI how to deal with my difficult in-laws, it's going to have to work way harder to find an answer.
And this takes more computers.
Which takes more data centers.
Which takes more space.
And guess who has that space?
Texas is becoming ground zero for the development of data centers, known as the backbone of digital infrastructure.
So why is Texas a magnet for new data centers?
Our track record says this is a good place to do any type of development, and data centers are no different.
This is Mike Commerlander. He's the president and CEO of the Hayes-Caldwell Economic Development Partnership.
Commerlander's work brings him close to the data center boom, overseeing developments throughout the southwestern part of the Hill Country.
Texas has a number of things going for it. First of all, Texas is big. It has a lot of land, and it has it at scale, right?
Data center campuses can consist of several warehouse-sized buildings. The more buildings you can build next to each other, the more computers you can have.
Then you need electricity to run those computers.
The ERCOT grid generally allows faster interconnection.
Most of the United States runs on big multi-state power grids.
But not here.
Texas has its own grid, which allows big energy users to get plugged in and connected faster.
Plus, Texas is kind of known for being business-friendly.
A regulatory climate that is known and predictable.
All of these factors make it attractive to developers looking to build some of the biggest data centers in the country.
Even UT's data center is expanding. They're building a new one in Round Rock.
We took a trip to see how the project is going. It's still in the early stages, but its concrete walls already tower over the condos and swimming pool that sit across the street.
I don't know how many square footage it is, but it's insane.
Christina Schwetter can see it from her kitchen.
It just kept getting higher and higher and higher and wider, and it just never seemed to stop. As you can see, it goes on almost forever like a concrete monolith.
When she moved in a couple of years ago, there was already one smaller data center across the street. She was fine with the old one, but the new one, not so much.
There are stretches of land where Tesla is and Amazon is, and no residentials are really there at all. Why couldn't the monolith been constructed there?
Schwetter says she worries that once it's finished, the new data center will affect her utility bills and her ability to sell her home in the future.
Will it be pulling from our water resources? Will it be pulling from our electricity as well? Will our electricity bills go up?
Next time, we'll dig into those questions. How much power does it take to run a warehouse of computers?
How much water does it take to keep them all cool?
And what does it mean for the rest of us? I'm Kaylee Hunt.
I'm Lee Walden.
And I'm Katie McAfee in Round Rock.
Support for Texas Standard comes from TrialMed, conducting clinical research for over 30 years. Info on current trials in Texas at trialmed.com.
Hey, what's cooking? Make sure to join us as we check in with Texas's top taco journalists to hear about the latest innovation stories and the people behind many a Texan's favorite go-to. It's Mondo Rayo with the Tacos of Texas, next Thursday on the Texas Standard.
Support for Tacos of Texas comes from HEB.
From the Texas Newsroom, I'm Shelby Rose. 3 Texas media groups will host 3 televised debates between U.S. Senate candidates James Talarico and Ken Paxton. The first is set for September in the Rio Grande Valley, followed by debates in Dallas and in Austin. Talarico has accepted. Paxton has not yet responded. The Texas Newsroom's Blaze Gainey reports on Talarico's campaign stop in Central Texas.
Hundreds of Texans stood shoulder to shoulder in Lockhart Tuesday night to hear from Democrat James Talarico, the party's U.S. Senate candidate, in November. Like much of his campaign stops, the nominee focused much of his speech about laying out his vision for what Texas could be like with the Democrat in office. He told supporters they needed to vote to make sure Ken Paxton doesn't win in the midterms.
If we can come together, not as Democrats or Republicans, but as Texans, to defeat the most corrupt politician in America, then we can come together to defeat this entire corrupt system.
There's nearly 3 months till the election, and both sides are amping up their exposure and attacks on each other as voters begin weighing their options. I'm Blaze Gainey in Austin.
New THC rules are set to go into effect Friday. The Texas Department of State Health Services will begin classifying Delta-8 and several other hemp products as controlled substances. A ban on many THC products has been looming for years, but was tied up in the courts. A judge ruled yesterday that most lyrics from Dallas rapper Yella Beezy cannot be used as evidence in his murder-for-hire trial. KERA's Dylan Duke reports the use of rap lyrics in criminal trials has become controversial.
Yella Beezy, whose real name is Marquise Conway, is accused of hiring a man to kill rapper Mo 3. Chad Baruch is an appellate attorney in Dallas. He said lyrics aren't used as evidence in other genres of music.
Anytime you're treating rap differently than other art forms, you're almost inevitably treating black performers differently than other performers.
Investigators said they relied on Conway's song lyrics for evidence because many witnesses refused to talk. Conway's trial is scheduled to begin August 24th. I'm Dylan Duke in Dallas.
Houston Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher is among the lawmakers criticizing the immigrant detention center in Dilley.
The United States government is traumatizing individuals that it has in detention.
She joined lawmakers on a tour of the detention center led by Congressman Joaquin Castro, who is calling for its closure over allegations of improper treatment of detainees, including children. ICE and the facility's private operators say they are meeting federal standards. And training camps open up today for both the Dallas Cowboys and the Houston Texans, the Cowboys in their California facility, the Texans in Houston. I'm Shelby Rose reporting in the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Half Price Books, a Texas-bred new and used bookstore, proudly supporting public media and sustainability by keeping books, music, and other media in circulation. Store locations and more information at hpb.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Nicole Rogers, and this is the St. Francis Wolf Sanctuary. What we do at the St. Francis Wolf Sanctuary is we rescue non-releasable wolf and wolf dog from across the United States. What I want people to know about wolves is that they are the only apex keystone predator in the United States that can not only restore and maintain an environmental ecosystem, but also engineer it. So St. Francis was started in 2002 by our founder, Jean Lefebvre. And we started when a timber wolf was found in a trap in 2002 in Spring, Texas by animal control officers. Unfortunately, the illegal breeding and ownership of wolf and wolf dogs as pets is still a very unfortunate thing that's happening in the state of Texas. And this animal had escaped kind of a situation where someone was collecting wolf without a USDA license in their backyard of their house there in Spring, Texas. And Jean built the sanctuary so that this animal could legally be transferred to her and she could start rescuing wolf and wolf dog in Texas. There were wolves native to Texas. We had both red and gray wolf all over our state of Texas, from Panhandle, Deep South, Shores and Galveston, all the way to Big Bend. We had lots and lots of both red and gray wolf until 1949, when the very last gray wolf was hunted out of the state of Texas. All the wolves that we save here at the sanctuary were born in captivity. That is why they're non-releasable. If you buy a wolf or a wolf dog as a pet and then it becomes too much for you to handle and you dump it in the woods thinking it'll be fine, it's a wolf, it'll slowly starve to death like a dog. Wolves born in captivity have no idea how to hunt. They've generally had DoorDash every day of their life. Wolf social dynamics are actually quite complex. There is no such thing in an alpha wolf in a wolf pack. Wolf packs are families, mom, dad, and their pups. That's it. They can have generations of pups, but there's no wolves from the outside. What there is a dominant parent and a submissive parent, just very much like human families. It's not a heavy dominance. It's not a dictatorship. It's just that there's one wolf that, when everything has been considered, goes, all right, we're going to do this, and everybody feels safe with that decision making. 95% of packs in the wild, as well as here in captivity, in bonds between the female and the male parental bond, the smaller female is usually the dominant because it's not based on size, gender, or strength. It's really kind of determined, we've experienced, on anxiety. Whichever wolf has the most anxiety, that is the wolf that's going to be the dominant wolf. And that is because, the bigger males know that they could overpower their partner, but they acquiesce that dominance for two reasons. One, it's loving. All right, little bit, I see you're not going to feel safe with me unless I let you make the final decision. That's the loving part. Leads into the second part, which is his survival and her survival as well. If she doesn't feel safe in the bond, she's not going to bond with him. If she doesn't bond with him, he's not going to thrive. They're crepuscular creatures, which means they're most active at sundown and sunrise. That's when we hear them howl the most, as well as they'll howl overnight. Not unlike your dog, if they hear a siren go by, they'll howl to a siren, which is kind of funny, but most of the day they den. They also do a lot of huffing and gruffing, and if they feel threatened, they will do an alarm howl, which doesn't sound like the typical oh like you're used to. It's more of like a sound. And when they do that, they're alerting the rest of the pack of, hey, something's approaching, or I'm seeing or smelling something that doesn't make me feel at ease. So everybody wake up and look at what's coming around. I will say I have an inordinately large spot for our newest rescue, North. He is just an amazing full black wolf, and we've had to teach him a lot of wolf behaviors, how to dig, how to seek shade, how to feel comfortable in a den, because he came from a very isolated living situation, which is unusual for a wolf as a pack animal. But now he's thriving and he's doing really well, and that's really made me proud to know that we are giving him the kind of care that he needs and teaching him the skills that he needs to know as a wolf. My goal is for especially our younger generations who are going to decide whether wolf exists in this country or not, to understand that without the wolf in healthy populations in the United States, our ecosystem is in danger of crashing, and if it crashes, we will go along with it. I'm Nicole Rogers. Thanks for listening to the Texas Standard.
Support for Texas Standard comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, committed to strengthening the state's workforce and its communities through safety and wellness grants and education initiatives. More at texasmutual.com/community impact.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. The Texas legislature made a significant change to the state's child welfare system nearly 10 years ago. It shifted most of the state's responsibilities for monitoring abused and neglected children to third-party contractors. It's now up to these contractors to place foster care kids in residential facilities or help find them foster parents. The goal of this restructuring was to keep children close to their hometowns. But nearly a decade into this shift, there are critics who say the results have been a mixed bag. Willow Higgins is an investigative reporter who has been writing about this for the Texas Observer. Willow, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks so much for having me.
Why did the legislature decide to push so much of this responsibility onto private organizations?
Yeah, so I guess I'll just say for a little bit of background that, the Texas child welfare system has always been run by nonprofit providers, on the ground. Like, it really has been nonprofit organizations who are, running foster homes, residential treatment centers, child placement agencies. But the shift that the Texas legislature has made and has been working on for almost a decade now has been to divide the state up into districts and to hire a private contractor, who's also a nonprofit, to be in charge of each district. And so basically what those contractors are in charge of doing is operating and managing the folks who are on the ground. So they're hiring caregivers, they're making sure people are trained adequately, they're handling incidents, rather than state agencies like the Texas's Department of Health and Human Services and Family Protective Services that previously in their legacy model did the brunt of this work. So Texas has been under close scrutiny for the past 15 years, really since it's been under this federal lawsuit because of abuse and neglect. And so essentially this new model is supposed to make those issues a little bit better. One main factor that they're trying to do is to be able to keep kids in the child welfare system closer to home. So rather than, say you're in foster care, rather than getting shipped to Dallas, if you were originally from the Houston area, these local contractors, the idea is that they're supposed to be, it's a little bit easier for them to be kept in their own district. Whether that is happening effectively, like you said, I think has been a mixed bag, and experts are still trying to kind of figure out how that is going.
So one big factor here is you write at least 50 child placement agencies have closed their doors around the state. Why is that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess aside from the new privatized system, this is hard work and not everyone is cut out for it. I had one expert tell me that, we're not necessarily setting up these nonprofits for success. We think these nonprofit organizations are doing this work because they believe in the mission and they it's a matter of heart. And a lot of times that's true. But the reality is that these nonprofits, they're not in the easiest position. They're competing with each other for funds and for resources. And, on top of the work itself, which is also tremendously difficult. I mean, taking care of children who have oftentimes been through hell, like that's not easy, and again, on top of that, we have the fact that these providers, they do have a lot of bureaucratic hurdles they have to work through because everything has been so under such intense scrutiny. There is a close eye on these folks, and sometimes that it's just another thing that they have to add to their long to-do list.
Well, you spent time looking into one of these agencies called Hope Rising, which started in 2012 and then in 2018 became a fully licensed child placement agency. Why does it work as sort of a case example of what's happening across the state?
Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. So, so Hope Rising was actually started in California, but was ultimately moved to Brenham, Texas, because the founder, Sherry Clement, learned that the Houston area is a national hotspot for sex trafficking, and that was a passion of hers, combating sex trafficking happening particularly in young girls. So when Sherry moved to Texas, she changed her organization to be a Christian ministry. And at first, the idea was that she was going to support these young women through therapeutic services, like equine therapy, where you actually use horses as a therapeutic model. But like you said, by 2018, they switched gears a little bit and became a child placement agency. That's a type of foster care where organizations are essentially finding, vetting, and training foster families in order to be good fits for the children in their purview. But Hope Rising was doing things a little bit differently. Not only were they using sort of, new age therapeutic models, they also had like a school that was supposed to provide community for the girls that were living in different homes. And they operated on multiple properties, and they provided wraparound services, and it was supposed to be sort of like this holistic approach.
So what happened? How did it go off the rails?
Yeah, so a lot of things happened. Hope Rising, it started off like a dream, some say. One thing that was happening was that the inspection reports I received from the state were not great. There were documented incidents of foster parents, letting kids tire themselves before they intervened in a fight. There were documents of caregivers for smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol with the children in their care. In another one, a foster parent kept toilet paper outside the bathroom so that children had to request it every time they used the restroom. So, while some houses were going, beautifully, in others, there were serious issues. And eventually, Sherry describes this event as a hostile takeover. The board members disagree, but eventually she did get ousted, like she feared, from her own organization. And the board of directors took it over and installed an interim director, with the hopes of making things better. But ultimately, the organization did close.
So is the state doing anything to address what now could be gaps in this system they've created?
Yeah, and you know what? I think things, the folks I've talked to assured me that things are getting better. I know this work is really hard and there are still problems, but there are a lot of people who are dedicating their careers to improving this system. Well, like you said, this, new private model where the state is divided into districts and private contractors are put in charge of the, caregivers in each district. Some are really hopeful about this. Some say that, it could just provide more eyes and more support than just, one state agency being in charge of a giant state. There has been tremendous resources of both funding and research funneled into this project. Like we said, jury's still sort of out on it, but it could be that, in some areas it's making things better, and in some areas not so much. The rollout is still happening.
Willow Higgins is an independent investigative reporter. She has a new story out in the Texas Observer. Willow, thank you again.
Thanks so much for the opportunity.
Support for Texas Standard comes from HEB and the My HEB app, which is available for download, and shopping fresh departments like seafood, produce, bakery, and deli, and scheduling curbside pickup or home delivery. More at heb.com.
It's the Texas Standard. I'm Laura Rice. A legal fight has been dividing congregants at a Houston megachurch after it stripped members of their right to vote on church business in 2023. Second Baptist has 94,000 members and $1 billion in assets, and a judge gave the church a victory earlier this month in a lawsuit by a group of congregants. Adrian Ashford has been following this for the Houston Chronicle. Adrian, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start at the beginning. What happened that caused a group of church members to sue the church?
So back in 2023, Second Baptist advertised a meeting that it said was a business meeting where church members were going to, ensure that the church was able to continue as a biblical church. They didn't advertise this, very much. They had, one or two emails that they sent to congregants where they mentioned this at the end of the email, but it wasn't something they publicized a ton. So about 317 people out of 94,000 members attended this meeting, and 315 voted to approve a new set of bylaws that basically handed church control over from congregants to a handful of trustees that were no longer elected but were sort of handpicked by the senior pastor. A year later, the longtime senior pastor of Second Baptist, Ed Young Sr., gave leadership of the church to his son, Ben Young, and after that, people that were frustrated about the new bylaws started to, try and reason with the church and try to convince them to reinstate how things used to be. But the church wasn't interested in doing that, and then eventually, some current and former members sued and argued that the church had misled them and committed fraud, essentially.
So this group started calling themselves the Jeremiah Council. What exactly did they argue? And I guess it wasn't successful?
So, this group, it's a nonprofit corporation in Texas, and they basically argued that the church, misled them in several ways. So first, they argued that the church did not sufficiently publicize this meeting. Church leaders never said that they were going to vote on whether members have the right to vote. They didn't say that they were going to change how the church is governed. And during the meeting itself, people who were voting on the bylaws weren't able to actually read them in full. So the Jeremiah Council argued that, people were not really sure of what they were voting on. The church was sort of presenting this as about biblical issues when it was really about power. And that was their grounds for filing a lawsuit.
So what has the church said? Have they responded publicly to the lawsuit or to the recent court victory?
So the church did fight the lawsuit. The crux of their argument was that this dispute over bylaws and control and who governs the church was really essentially a sort of religious issue and a religious question. And so therefore, secular court doesn't have the right to tell the church what to do, basically. So that was sort of the case that the church was making, and the judge largely sided with them on that.
Does this case have the potential to have broader impacts on how churches can operate?
I think it definitely does. I've talked to a couple people in the last few weeks about this doctrine of church autonomy and, sort of churches' right to not be, controlled or sort of, infringed on by the state. And, that principle in Texas law has really kind of been expanded a lot over the last few years. There have been a series of rulings. There was a ruling in a Gateway Church. A Gateway Church is a megachurch in Dallas that had a longtime lead pastor who eventually pled guilty to sexually abusing a 12-year-old child. So congregants of that church sued and said that the pastor had given them sort of a verbal money back guarantee on their tithes. And they said that, they wanted their tithe money back. But the court in that sort of dispute also ruled that this was essentially a religious question and religious speech. And as a result, that money back guarantee, quote unquote, was not enforceable. So I think we're seeing more and more uses of this doctrine of church autonomy. We're seeing it applied to cases that, may be about doctrine in some ways, but also may be about power and money in a lot of other ways. So I think it's interesting to track sort of where the limits of that are going to be and how that's going to play out in future lawsuits related to churches.
Adrian Ashford covers religion for the Houston Chronicle. Adrian, thank you so much.
Thank you for asking these questions.
And you're listening to the Texas Standard. That sound means it's time for our Talk of Texas segment, and Shelley Brisbane is stepping in to talk to us about artificial intelligence. Right, Shelley?
Hey, Laura, and it is the real me. I promise I'm not an AI.
I'm so glad. We are working on a special coming up, planned tentatively for September if we get all our work done. But what we really want to do right now is hear from Texans about what exactly? About how they're using AI, about how they feel about it?
Well, what we asked this week, Laura, was how folks are feeling about AI. And that's the topic that we put out to all the social media platforms. And we've been getting a lot of response. And it's very, people are skeptical. They're wondering about AI. Some people are downright hostile to it. It's a lot of variety. Karen Shank on Facebook says, I think they should have learned from the Terminator movies and Skynet.
Right? I know. I recently watched those and I was thinking a lot about where we are right now.
Well, you're brave to expose yourself to that in the AI world. Mark Conant says, what does AI think about us? That's a good existential question to ponder.
Yes.
Not sure we'll be able to answer that in our special, I'm afraid. Marilyn Knapp Lip says, if you're using an AI app to ask a question, you need to already know the answer to recognize any misinformation. I think it's certainly true that with AI, and I've used it a fair bit myself, but it's true that you need to sort of know what you know and know what follow-up to questions to ask, even if you aren't super skeptical. Always a good idea to know enough about the topic to sort of make some conversation with it.
Well, check the source. I mean, that I think is what we're hearing from a lot of commenters too, is like people need to be trained how to use AI, and especially young people and what kinds of questions to ask and how to verify. And so asking follow-up questions is a good part of that. But then I think, being able to do your own human research and figuring out where this is coming from and whether that's a legitimate source is a really big part of it too.
Absolutely. And one more comment from Facebook. Sherry Foreman says, in my opinion, I think AI is destroying people's ability to use critical thinking skills. That's kind of what we're just talking about, making sure that when you interact with AI, you're using your own brain too.
Right. Well, one thing that we've been talking about is we really want to hear from lots of people who use AI or don't use it in a variety of fields. And what would be really interesting is to get, say a teacher or a CPA or, any variety, a doctor, a dentist, like, how are you using AI in your field? Or what are some of the challenges that are coming up at work? I really hope that people reach out and kind of give us their personal experiences as well so we can follow up with them.
Absolutely, because I think a lot of people have really different experiences with AI. Some people have been asked to use or told to use AI at work or in school, and some people are like, hey, what's this thing all about? Maybe it's fun. Maybe it's a way I can create an app if I'm that way inclined. I talk to a lot of people who are coding their own apps, which was, I think, beyond most of what our audience might be thinking of doing.
Right.
But for some folks, that's a great way to use AI to do something they couldn't do before.
Absolutely. Shelley Brisbane is a producer and a reporter here with the Texas Standard and filling in on the Talk of Texas today. Let us know what you think at texasstandard.org/talk.
Philanthropic support for Texas Standard comes from Casey and Scott O'Hare, the Winkler Family Foundation, Lynn Dobson and Greg Waldridge, Adrian Killam, the George Huntington family, and St. David's Foundation. Additionally, Texas Mutual Insurance Company is a founding sponsor of Texas Standard.